and we talked about this on the radio show earlier this week, it is different that they're not superheroes, but yet they kind of are. And the Michael, the lead character, is a guy who some would classify as handicapped. I mean, he's got a serious disorder.
He has Tourette syndrome.
Right, which you have.
Which I have, and my son Michael, who I wrote the book for, has.
Right, and so that's not something that usually, you don't see Spider-Man with Tourette's. Right. And he's beat up, which Spider-Man is beat up, but this is kind of a different scenario entirely. Even the kids who in the first book beat up Michael, you understand them. So it's almost kind of like and I say this as a lifelong loser, it's kind of like the Losers Club. It's kind of like all of us who are just like regular club, I guess, not Losers Club, but like the Regulars Club, where we're like, okay, I can't relate to the cheerleader. I mean, she's nice, but I never met a cheerleader. I shouldn't say this, my wife was a cheerleader. Besides my wife, who I didn't meet in school, I never met a cheerleader who was nice, I was never part of that crew, so you kind of feel you connect with the people.
I had a man show up at a book signing, and he obviously had Tourette syndrome. He was ticking pretty hard, and he said, you know what, Mr. Evans, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm part of the in crowd. And I thought, that was great.
What was it like growing up with Tourette's, and what's it like for your son?
It's horrible. It was horrible. I think on some level we're more tolerant now because we have more labels to put on him. It's like, oh, he has Tourette syndrome. When I was little, I was just weird. And so when I first moved to the state of Utah from Los Angeles, my mom sent me on a bus up to a summer camp, and someone noticed me ticking pretty hard. I was nervous and didn't know anyone. And when I got off the bus, the whole bus surrounded me, and someone said, look, he's a freak. And of course, my tics are going crazy. And they're like, look what he's doing, look. And that was pretty tough. It was pretty tough.
Your son has it.
Michael has struggled with it even more than I have. His Tourette's is more severe, but I also see him growing to be a really wonderful young man.
How does it manifest? Because everybody always thinks Tourette's is like a character in a movie that either shouts out swear words or
I have that impulse. It's corporeal. I have the impulse to spit in the face of famous people. That's why Glenn.
He told me that first time we actually sat face to face, we were on CNN, and I said, how does this with you like right now? And he said, I have a big urge to spit in your face. Yeah. And I'm like, you're not alone. You're in New York City. A lot of people have that.
Well, I was actually in the Oval Office, and I had to step away from the President of the United States for that reason. Carrie knew. She stepped in, my wife, and stepped in and talked to him because it's like I can't hold. I'm literally biting my tongue, and walking away. It's like because the pressure was so strong to do.
Seriously.
Something. Yeah.
And your son, do you mind? How does it manifest with him? Is it different with everybody?
Yeah, it is because it's a neurological disorder. With Michael, he's had a lot of behavioral challenges, and he kind of processes things a little bit different. Very smart, extremely smart, and thinks a lot about things. Some OCD. He does have tics, and that's about it. I mean,
so how do you? We'll get to the book here in a second, but how do you conquer? Because if I didn't know, I wouldn't know. With you,
yeah.
Do you grow out of it? Do you control it more?
No, it varies. If you were to go back and look at the tape of me, I saw first time I was on the Today Show, I was ticking like crazy, and that's all I could see were my tics. I have friends who didn't know I had Tourette syndrome because you just kind of mask the movements. Michael would drop his pen on the ground when he really needed to tick. It's like an itch.
Did you do that?
Is
that what you did? Are these things that Michael's doing what you did or your son does?
Yeah, the things are Michael has the exact same Tourette symptoms that I have. Yeah. But you don't grow out of it. But it comes and goes. When I was 20, it was extremely severe. You'd be uncomfortable sitting next to me, maybe. And when I was in high school, I had vocal tics. So if I go to a movie, I'd be going the whole movie. And eventually someone would turn around and say, shut up. And I wouldn't even realize I was doing it.
That must have sucked. Yeah, I mean, I know that's an understatement.
Yeah, but you know, Glenn, I am so grateful that I had Tourette syndrome, that I have Tourette syndrome. And I see these wonderful youth around the country that come to my book signings who have Tourette syndrome and say, thank you. One kid told me, it's like, you've made it cool to have Tourette syndrome. Thank you so much. And also kids who are autistic are coming to my signings. And it's really fascinating. It's like, how cool that they can relate to this character. It's like, this kid's a superhero. And he has Tourette's like me, I can be something great.
Richard called me up, and I can remember I was sitting in my office in New York, and he called me up and he said, I have this book, and I don't know if we've ever really shared this on the air, but Simon & Schuster made me change the ending of the Christmas sweater. And the Christmas sweater, the way I had it, was the way I wanted it. But I had to exchange one book for them. I had to give them, I think, an inconvenient book and say, you just do this one for free, but you have to publish this one, because I believed in that one so much. But they didn't like the ending, because the ending was true. And I couldn't write another ending. And we had met. And we talked on the phone. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. We talked on the phone for quite some time. And the ending of the Christmas sweater and the fixes all the way through it to get to that ending, he wrote. Because I couldn't do it. And he was on the phone and he had an inspiration and he was like, I got it, I'll call you back. And did that. So when he called me, we had been friends, and he called me in New York and he said, I have this book I want you to read. And he said, and I had just signed the deal to be a publisher, and I was praying, how do I get books out that kids can read, that don't treat kids like morons, that we can get good values out without it being a values book? Phone rings. And he says, Glenn, I think this was written for you, and nobody gets it. Nobody gets it. I brought it to publishers, and they don't get it. And they want me to dumb it down. And I said, let me read it. And I said, dumb it down? I think it's too dumb the way it was. Bring it up a level. Let's treat young adults like young adults. You know, George Washington was surveying at 15 years old. And
the line I loved you said is, if they don't understand it, get a dictionary.
Yeah. That's what my parents used to say all the time. And I think it was because they didn't know the meaning of the word themselves. They'd say, look it up. I'm not going to help you. And when we first decided to print it, it was kind of scary, because I think we both felt really good about it, but nobody else had any faith in this.
The bookstores didn't think it would sell. They hardly bought any copies.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think because the publishing world plays the same way little kids play soccer. The ball goes over here and everyone runs over there. Oh, we're doing wizard books. Oh, now we're doing vampire books. This was not what was out there. And so when I did my first book, The Christmas Box, it's ironic, my #1 bestsellers have all been rejected by publishers because it was different. And so we were pioneering with this. We knew something. We let kids read it. We let 500 students read the book before we took it to them. And every teacher in every school reported it was the most popular book that had ever gone through their school. So we knew, we had field study. They didn't care. It didn't look like a successful book. The day this hit #1, USA Today did an article saying, what is the next big seller? Didn't even mention my book.
Wow.
Mentioned my editor's book, one he had just written, but didn't even mention this book. It's like, and guess what? Every single book on their list looked like Hunger Games. Every single one of them. And I just smiled, because I remember going through the same process with The Christmas Box that went on to sell 8 million copies and be one of the biggest books
Will
of the
you tell the story on that? Because this is an amazing... Have you ever read The Christmas Box? Marissa?
I have it.
You have it? Yeah.
We'll read it at Christmas time.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And it's a short little story. Do you know the story behind it, Marissa?
No, I don't.
Okay. Listen to the story of how The Christmas Box happened. 8 million copies sold.
I was 29 years old. I had just run for the state legislature, lost by 100 votes. And the best loss I've ever had in my life, because I suddenly had this time on my hands. And so I sat down to do something I'd always wanted to do, and that is write a book. And I thought, what should I write? And I thought, well, what am I most passionate about? I thought, my kids. I was a father with 2 beautiful young daughters, 5 and 3, Jenna and Allie. I thought, I'm going to write a book about how parents love their children. When I wrote it, I went to Kinko's copy centers, made up 20 copies, handed them out. Didn't think anything of it, thought I was done. But within weeks, those 20 copies had been read hundreds of times. And bookstores start calling with orders for my book. So that's when I sent it to publishers, local publishers, who all rejected the book. Because they said a book like this will never sell. But I'm getting so many requests that I self-published the book. And within 6 weeks of coming out in the state of Utah, it was the #1 book in the state of Utah. The next year, it hit #2 on the New York Times bestseller list as a self-published book. And that's when my whole world exploded.
Hang on just a second. Consider that. A self-published book, #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. And everyone said, it won't work. Let me talk to the kids. What do you learn from that story? Marissa.
That you can do anything you put your mind to. You don't have to have the approval of other people.
Exactly right. And most people, if you tie what you just said to what is happening in the book sales right now, if it's not a vampire or a Hunger Games book, they don't want to publish it because that's what's hot, and so everybody wants to do that. Most people they're ruled by fear, and they're ruled by the fear of failure. Failure's good. You just said it a minute ago. He wrote that book because he failed in his political
Aspirations.
Yeah, aspirations. I'm glad you failed.
Me too.
You would have sucked. You would have sucked. But at least you'd still have your soul. When we come back, I want to get into the story of Michael Vey and get to the audience questions here in just a second, and also talk a little bit about why do you think that grades are going up from kids reading this series? The teachers are reporting grades are going up. We'll get into that next.